Hey folks, Mr. Justin here with a 2-for-1 demonstration today. First I'm going to look at how I create the ash waste effect on my Blood Angels bases, and then I'm going to show you how I managed to use a spray varnish to lock the pigment in place without losing the detail. Here we go. Hey folks, Mr. Justin here with Secret Weapon Miniatures. I am back with my Blood Angels librarian. I need to finish up his force weapon, but otherwise he's ready to go and I am ready to do his base. He is going to match the rest of my Blood Angels force. Here's one of my finished sergeants. The base was done entirely with pigments. It makes it easy to match the army together and blend the weathering up onto their bodies. I'm going for the Ash Waste Armageddon look. And to do that, I have 5 pigments with me today. I have my Ancient Earth, Slate Gray, Slate Gray, Ash Gray, Oxide White, and this time I'm going to try a little bit of the Exhaust Black just to create a more extreme look for this guy, but we'll see how that goes. I'm going to be using thinner. In this case I have some isopropyl alcohol that I have put into a little cup. And to get started here, I am just going to take a brush, start with my dark color for the moment. Putting this on nice and heavy. One of the nice things about working with a thinner is I can come in, I can remove excess, I can make a lot of changes. I'll do another video post on why I prefer working with a thinner to a fixer on most occasions, certainly not all the time. But once I've got my pigment in place, I'm going to take a soft brush, load it full of the alcohol, my thinner, flow it onto the pigments, help lock things in place. See how that's just flowing into there. I'm also going to go ahead and you can see I did not paint the bottom of his foot. It's alright. I'm going to take the alcohol, rub it onto the bottom of his feet. He's already been sealed, so this won't hurt the paint at all. Once that's done, I can come back with my brush, a little bit of that darker color again. I'm just going to sprinkle it onto the bottom of his foot. So I'm loading it up on the brush, tapping the edge of the brush to sprinkle it onto his feet. It's going to fall right down onto the base. Actually dab a little bit of this from the brush on his foot. While I've got it, I'm moving on to the Slate Gray now. And dab a little bit of that onto the bottom of his feet. Sprinkle a little onto the base. While that alcohol is still wet, it's going to absorb the pigment, help bind it and blend it in with the previous color. See, I got a little bit on the top of his foot here. That's fine. Nice random look. Blend that in a little bit just by stippling. Grab another soft dry brush here. This is more of the Slate Gray. You can see I'm just sprinkling it over that still wet alcohol. I want more of the gray look than the green look. That green is to give it a wet ash look, create some depth, some interesting color. If it gets to be too much, again, I can always tone it back. The alcohol, remove some, make all the changes I want. I can go back to this tomorrow, remove it all completely and start again. Until you fix it in place, until you seal it, you got all the time in the world. Alright, this time I'm going to very lightly bring it up onto the backs of his legs. Again, coming in with my Slate Gray, very gentle sprinkle on the back of his legs. See, I do think that's a little too much, so I'm going to take my other soft dry brush, stipple that out a bit. Come back, I'll add more. So this is still wet. Lots of alcohol in there. I'm going to go ahead and finish some more of my colors, let it dry, and come back, take a look at it. This time I'm going with my ash gray, one of the lighter colors. You can see it absorbing straight into the alcohol, blending with the other colors. Make sure I get some on his feet. Make sure I get some on the backs of his legs. When the alcohol dries, all those light colors are going to come out. Alright, now last but not least, come in with just a touch of the oxide white, really light sprinkle. It's a really bright color, even by contrast against the gray, so I want to keep this nice and light. Just a dusting. Alright, so here it is while it's still wet. Mostly like goo. That's alright. Before I let that dry, I'm going to touch up a little bit on the bottom of his foot. Just stipple it together a bit, help blend it in. Wait for that to dry, I come in and do some touch-up. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to give this a couple minutes to dry. Be right back. And it's dry and we're back. You can see now how the bases are starting to shape up. You can see though on the original Blood Angel I used more of the lighter colors, and so that's what I'm going to do now. But you can definitely see how on the Librarian you've got that nice rich depth of color starting to form from using multiple pigments. I'm also going to start by bringing in one of my soft brushes and picking away at his foot a little bit, because although I want the pigment color to stay, I also want that detail to pop out. So all I've done is brush away some of the pigment. Again, the nice thing about working with a thinner is that I can come in and brush away the pigment after it's dry. With a fixer, it's there for good. You got to get it right the first try. No changes. I can always come in now with a fixer and keep things in place, but that's another conversation. So I'm going to take some of my ash gray from a different brush. Again, I'm just sprinkling it on. Go ahead and start stippling here and there in a couple of places. Clean that brush off. Come back with my oxide white. A little heavier this time. Still stippling. Or I'm sorry, still sprinkling. I will stipple, but not yet. I'll get somewhat even distribution. Come in and selectively stipple where I want to lighten it up the most. Come back to my ash gray. Again, do this in layers. It's the best way to do pigment. It doesn't matter if you're doing rust or ash, dirt, sand. And for those of you that have seen my desert sands bases on the site, this is how I did that as well. Alright, I am going to try the exhaust black. I put a tiny bit on my brush. This is a new test for this, just because the more I thought about ash wasteland, the more I thought there might be actual ash involved, cinders and soot. So I'm going to add a little bit. See how I feel about it. Mixed feelings. Definitely mixed feelings. But that's alright. I can tone it down by adding some more gray over the top. do like it, but I definitely want to tone it down. Gently stippling some of it into place. Come back again with my white. Sprinkle. Sprinkle. Sprinkle, 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 sprinkle. Cloud there, get rid of that. Alright, so at this point, it is definitely a little darker than the bulk of the original Blood Angel. See that on him, got the same dark color by his foot there. But I like it. I'm happy with how it looks. He will blend in well with the rest of the army. So I am going to take my thinner again, flow it over the model, lock things down before I hit it with the sealer. This also gives me an opportunity to come in and add a little more to his legs if I want to, and I think I do. Again, I'm just trying to let the drop of thinner on my brush pull itself onto the pigments and flow out. I'm not actually pressing the brush down into place. You don't want to let it drop. So get the drop, you can see the little ball of thinner just until it touches the pigments, then it'll flow right off of the brush. Capillary action, just suck that right down into the pigments. Alright, and I am going to add a little bit more color to his legs, so I'm coming in with the ash gray, very light sprinkling, a little more thinner on his leg. In this case, because there's not pigment there now, I can dab it on wherever I want. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. Now you won't be able to see where you got your pigment until that dries when you're doing it like this, sprinkling over the thinner like this. So less is a good idea at this point, because you need to wait for that to dry until you can see how it looks. Again, working with thinner, you can always remove it. There we go. Nice and heavy on his legs. Alright, so again, I'm going to let this dry for a couple of minutes. Come back and varnish him so that he's ready to go. Alright, this is now dry and ready to varnish, but I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to the pigment here. You can see where it turned into a bit of a wash on his leg there, so I can just come in with my brush, pull some of that out, clean it off a bit, add a little bit of alcohol, just pull it all right out. So I can get it off of his leg there, because I wasn't entirely happy with the way that looked. Likewise, I think a little thick on that foot. Not much, just a little bit, so I'm going to damp a brush and just stipple away some of the pigment. So he still has pigmenty foot. It's not as heavy. Likewise, you can now see the detail on the back. See how the pigment I sprinkled at the end there is now neatly attached to his legs. So let's compare this to the original guy. Reasonably similar now. The black definitely makes a difference. But they definitely look similar now. Certainly work as part of a combined army. So now it's time to varnish the model, and I will be right back again. Alright, I have pulled the camera back, and I have shaken up my matte sealer. Again, I'm going to do this even lighter than when I varnished the finished model to begin with. Make sure it's flowing correctly, and then from a nice distance, you can see I'm well back here, start off. Got a little too heavy on that side even. From here, that's it. From here, that's it. I'll be able to see whether or not it's working from here up here. And that's it. That's all it's going to take. All I'm trying to do is lock the pigment in place. The model has already been sealed, so that's all I need. I'll be back with the final photos. And here we are again with a look at the finished models. Both of these bases were done entirely with pigments using the method I outlined in the video here. This is a close-up of the Sargent. Again, the base is entirely pigment except for the ring around the edge. And since I know someone's going to ask, here is a look at a rust effect done the same way. I used the thinner and 6 different pigments. The image on the right is after it has been hit with a spray varnish. So you can see we've lost a tiny bit of the texture, but none of the depth of color. So if you are losing all of your color from the pigments when you varnish, the answer is you're probably just using too much varnish. Thanks again, and of course, if you have any questions, drop an email to misterjustin@secretweaponminiatures.com.